By now, you've heard about last week's phone call between President-elect Donald Trump and the leader of Taiwan, which was immediately blasted by Democrats and even many within the Republican Party. And Vice President-elect Mike Pence hit the weekend talk shows to try to tamp down the resulting controversy over the call. The tensions increased Monday with an official rebuke of Donald Trump by the government of China, which issued a final statement warning of troubles for the China-U.S. relationship. For his part, Mr. Trump has not backed down and took to Twitter to challenge Beijing on a number of issues. But are Mr. Trump's critics here in the United States maybe pouncing too soon? Might there be some benefit to pushing back on America's long-standing one-China policy, which refuses to acknowledge the sovereignty of Taiwan? My next guest says yes, and he's written a piece encouraging his fellow Democrats to take a broader look at what Mr. Trump may be trying to accomplish. He's Bryan Dean Wright, former CIA covert officer, commentator, consultant on U.S. national security issues. His columns have appeared in the Los Angeles Times and The Hill, among other places. He joins me in studio. On a recent piece, you tell your fellow Democrats that pushing back on his phone call to Taiwan is a political loser. Explain where you think he can gain with this.
Yeah. So the party came out very strong against him, specifically saying, this kind of activity is going to push the nation into war. And I think what President-elect Trump and his administration are saying is, look, we are already in a war. We are in an economic or a trade war, and we have been for quite some time. And so we need to have a very different kind of policy with China, and that means doing things perhaps a bit scandalously in some cases, or differently, certainly, right? And so I think him taking that phone call is a demonstration of that. Why that matters, I think, politically, particularly for Democrats, is he is giving voice to all of the victims of that economic trade war of the past 15 years. So all the voters who put him over the top in Michigan, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, all of those voters have been hammered and hammered hard by these trade policies. So by taking a strong stance against the Chinese, I think that he's showing and demonstrating, at least in the political sense, that he cares about them. And I think that that's important. And if we don't play that messaging game, if I will, correctly, we stand a much less poorer chance of actually getting the voices that we need behind us.
Does the end game concern you, that China may turn fully against us?
Well, that is certainly the risk, right? But I have to say, not only just on the economic side of things, on the national security side as well, we have had a very uncollaborative partner in China. Again, I can't go into details given the fact that I worked on this stuff on the classified end of things, but I can tell you this. We tried to engage China on a whole bunch of different issues for many years, and the Chinese were very reluctant to ever even acknowledge that we gave them anything, let alone actually do anything. And you see the result of that, for instance, in North Korea. China is buying hundreds of millions of dollars worth of coal from North Korea. So we can slap on all the sanctions we want, but if North Korea can get that hard currency from China through the sale of their coal, they can move forward with their nuclear weapons program and their ballistic missile program. So we need a more responsible actor in China, and I think it might take a little bit of shaking up of that relationship to do it.
Play this out for me. What happens in the short term with China and the long term? Where do you see this going with the Trump administration?
Well, I think the first thing that he's going to have to do is show his base, the people who elected him from these swing states or Rust Belt, North Carolina, that he's serious in terms of addressing this economic issue, this imbalance of trade with China. And whether that's tariffs, if it's the currency issue, whether he does something like insist that for all the things that the Chinese have stolen from us, that we're going to charge them for that. So China controls about $1.2 trillion of our debt. He can, go to them and negotiate that down, possibly. So I think those are the kinds of things in the next 6 months to a year he's going to have to push hard on. And I think a part of that will also be the North Korea issue, because that is something that has gotten worse and worse under the Obama administration and Bush as well.
What do you fear about Trump?
I don't know exactly what he believes on any particular given day, is my gut feel. And now my bias is I'm a Democrat, and I didn't vote for him and don't support him. But that is why I would be fearful of this man having the presidency. Now, my hope is that he will grow into the presidency, or secondarily, he will surround himself, much like other presidents have done, with good, thoughtful, smart people who can help guide him through that process. And I think, I hate to have hope as a strategy, but that's certainly my hope for the president.
When the Secretary of State is announced, will that mean a lot to you?
It will, and I'll tell you, if he nominates David Petraeus, who, of course, is a former CIA director, he was a director when I was there, that would be deeply problematic for me, because it would show that there's a hypocrisy around the classified email business. Obviously, Petraeus gave all of his secrets and our secrets to his mistress. And I just can't respect that. So if he chose David Petraeus, I would be deeply offended.
Is there anyone you'd like to see him shoot?
I think he has some good options. You know, the former governor of Utah, John Huntsman, I believe, he would, I think, bring a certain amount of gravitas to the position. He certainly knows the China issue, and I think he's a mature, stable hand.
Former ambassador.
That's right, correct. So I think that he would be somebody that Democrats could get behind it and support.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They would.
Yeah.
Mr. Trump assumes office. What do you think is the greatest threat to our national security?
Well, I mentioned North Korea, and I certainly think that's up there, if not the top one, because we have an insane individual with mental problems who drinks too much alcohol, that has nuclear weapons, and a ballistic missile program that can develop and send those weapons into South Korea, Japan, and others. That's
Donald Trump says he can negotiate with anything. That's what he's a master of, doing deals. Can he negotiate with North Korea?
Boy, if he can pull that off, deal of the century. And I'll tell you, if he could do it, he would be the guy to do it, because, if I may, he's got an ego. Our president-elect, and so does Kim Jong-un. So I think that if there is an ability for those two men to get together and work it out, it's possible.
Sort of like Nixon going to China.
Precisely. I mean, I think that the odds are long, and I think that Kim Jong-un is a very strange fellow, and so I don't know that you can deal on any kind of rational basis with that man, but I think it's possible. The other issue that I would highlight and mention is the potential for cyber attacks. You know, I think that we've seen that in the past 6 months, a few of these things happen and shutting down different systems. I don't think the economy, the country is ready for that kind of serious attack, and I think that if the president does anything in the first few months, he really needs to focus the administration on that potential.
What do you think about Obama and Putin?
I think that they have a very poor relationship, because the president wanted to use facts and analysis to try to convince Mr. Putin to do something.
Will it improve with Trump?
I think so, yeah. I think that they can play that personality game better than President Obama ever did.
Thank you, Bryan.
My pleasure.
For more on Bryan's writings, check out his Twitter feed, which you'll find at Bryan Dean Wright.